They sent a bulldozer to crush the cabin I built with my late wife, claiming I owed HOA fees to an association I was never part of. They thought I was just an old man they could bully into surrendering my lakefront land. What they didn't know was that my children don't just visit me on weekends, they're federal agents. And when Karen Holt and her crooked HOA declared war on me, they had no idea they'd picked a fight with an entire family trained to bring criminals down. The lake has always been my sanctuary. At 68, the mornings by the water were my church, my place of peace after a lifetime of hard work. That day started like any other. The mist rolled across the surface like a silver veil, curling around the dock I'd repaired with my own hands last summer. My coffee steamed in the cool air, bitter but strong, the way I liked it. I leaned on the wooden railing, listening to the gentle lap of waves against the pilings, feeling the old wood creak under my slippers. This cabin wasn't just a house. It was my life's work, the dream my late wife, Eliza, and I had poured every ounce of sweat and love into. 30 years of birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas mornings, all soaked into the grain of those walls. I was halfway through that first cup when something broke the serenity. A flash of color, bright orange, glaring against the weathered wood of the boathouse door at the end of the dock. My stomach tightened. It didn't belong there. I walked down slowly, the mist parting around my legs, each step heavier than the last. The paper wasn't taped, wasn't gently placed. It was nailed. A thick iron spike driven deep into the siding Eliza and I had painted ourselves more than a decade ago. That single nail felt like an insult, a violation. I yanked it free, wincing at the small splintered hole left behind. The paper fluttered in my hand, official looking, stamped with bold black letters across the top Lakeshore Grove Homeowners Association. My eyes narrowed. I wasn't a member of any Lakeshore Grove HOA. My property sat half a mile outside their neatly trimmed subdivision, a fact carved into the county plat map itself. My grandfather bought this land in the 1960s, clean, free, uncontested, and I had the deed locked in my cabinet. Still, the words on that notice made my chest go cold. Final notice unpaid, HOA dues. Demolition scheduled. I read it twice. Then a third time, thinking maybe I'd missed some detail, some explanation. The figure scrawled beneath $11,740.26 was so oddly specific, it looked legitimate. Listed beneath were violations: non-compliant dock maintenance, unapproved siding color, unauthorized structures. They were describing my dock, the one I'd replanked last year, and my cabin, built with Eliza's hands and mine. But the line at the bottom drove a spike straight into me. Deadline 3 days, or demolition will proceed. I stood frozen, paper trembling slightly in my grip. My first thought wasn't rage. It was confusion. How could this be possible? HOAs didn't just extend boundaries like kingdoms in the Middle Ages. This had to be an error, a clerical mistake. Someone must have ticked the wrong box, entered the wrong lot number. That had to be it. Inside, I set the coffee down, untouched now, and reached for the phone number listed at the bottom of the page. My hands were steady, though a strange heaviness pressed on my chest. The line rang twice before a syrupy voice answered. "Lakeshore Grove, this is Karen. How can I help you today?" Her tone was honey-sweet, almost rehearsed. I introduced myself, explained what I had found nailed to my boathouse, careful to keep my voice calm. "Ma'am, I believe there's been a mix-up. My land isn't under your association. Always has been separate. The county plat map proves it." There was a pause, then a little tutting sound, like a teacher disappointed in a lazy student. "Oh, Mr. Colton," she cooed. "I see your file right here. It looks like you're a bit behind on your dues." I stiffened. There are no dues. I've never been part of Lakeshore Grove. Check the county records. A soft sigh. Our records show your parcel was annexed 6 weeks ago following a community vote. I'm sure you received the paperwork. Maybe it got lost in the shuffle. The way she said annexed and community vote sent an uncomfortable ripple through me. But she went on, lowering her voice like a soothing nurse. "Don't worry. I'll flag it as a possible clerical issue. These things happen. We'll have it all sorted before any demolition is scheduled." Her words were smooth, practiced, meant to reassure, but they rang hollow. Something about her tone felt oily, as if she were reciting a script she'd spoken to others before. Still, I thanked her, told myself she would fix it, told myself the system worked. Mistakes get corrected. That's how it's supposed to be. But the next morning, peace was shattered. The sun was harsh and golden, burning off the mist. I was just grinding my beans when a deep rumble shook the ground beneath my kitchen. Not the rattle of an old pickup, something heavier. I stepped to the window. There it was. A flatbed truck idling at the end of my driveway, and chained to it. A yellow backhoe, hydraulic arm folded like an insect waiting to strike. A man in a reflective vest and hard hat climbed down, clipboard in hand, burly, unsmiling, his face lined from years in the sun. I met him on the porch, my heart pounding, though I forced my voice calm. "Can I help you?" He grunted, didn't meet my eye, just tapped the clipboard. "Colton, we've got a work order to tear down the boathouse. If the site ain't cleared, we start on the main cabin." For a moment, I could only stare. The words crashed through me like thunder. "There's been a mistake. I called yesterday. The secretary said she'd fix it." The man finally looked at me, his eyes tired, uninterested. "Mister, I don't know about that. I just follow orders. You got 12 grand for a certified check. Otherwise," he jerked a thumb toward the machine. "That thing starts easy." The diesel fumes coiled up between us, heavy and nauseating. My throat went dry. It was real. The woman's sugary promises had been a lie. And now a 10-ton machine sat in my driveway, ready to reduce 30 years of memories to rubble. I nodded slowly, masking the tremor in my hands. "All right, give me a moment. Let me make a phone call." I retreated inside, closed the door, and slid the deadbolt. The sharp click echoed in my ears like the cocking of a gun. I leaned against the door, chest heaving. I wasn't just dealing with a mistake. This was deliberate, coordinated. They weren't just after money. They wanted my land. And for the first time in decades, I felt truly hunted. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the orange notice spread across the counter like it was a death warrant. The steady hum of the backhoe's engine outside was a reminder that this wasn't some nightmare I'd wake up from. I needed help, real help. My first instinct was to call the sheriff, but a voice in my head told me not yet. If this was some kind of scam, I'd need more than a deputy showing up and shrugging his shoulders. So I picked up the phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I hit the one number I knew would bring clarity: my daughter's. Dana wasn't just my little girl anymore. She was Special Agent Dana Colton, Federal Bureau of Investigation. She answered on the first ring. "Dad, everything okay?" My voice cracked despite my effort to steady it. I told her about the notice, about Karen Holt on the phone with her syrupy lies, and now the demolition truck parked 20 feet from my porch. There was silence for a beat. Then her tone shifted, no longer daughter, but agent. Crisp. Controlled. Listen carefully. Don't go back outside. Don't argue. Document everything. Go to each window and take pictures: truck, backhoe, license plates, the foreman if you can. Then grab your deed, last property tax bill, and the survey you had done when you built the boathouse. Photograph every page. Send them to me. Then go straight to the county clerk's office and get a certified plat map. Don't just look at it. Get the stamp. That's your shield, oi. Do you understand? I did. I might have been a retired electrician, but I knew how to follow instructions. Yes. Good. Do it now. I'll call you soon. The line clicked dead. For the first time that morning, my fear began to harden into something else: focus. I wasn't powerless. I had steps to follow. I grabbed my phone, crept through the house, and snapped photos from the kitchen, the living room, the upstairs window. The foreman leaned on his truck, smoking, bored but menacing in his silence. His clipboard glinted in the sun. I zoomed in until I caught every detail of his face, the letters on the side of his vest, even the faint dirt smeared across his cheek. Evidence. Next, I unlocked the old metal file cabinet in my office. Inside, carefully filed in a folder labeled property, was everything that mattered: my grandfather's original deed, From 1965, the updated title in my name. The blueprints Eliza and I drew up when we built the cabin, and the county surveyor's map marking every inch of boundary. All of it was proof. All of it was mine. I laid them out on the table and snapped picture after picture, making sure the date stamp burned onto every image. When I was done, I slid the papers back into their folder, tucked it under my arm, and stepped into my truck. The backhoe loomed in the mirror as I drove away, its arm folded like a predator waiting for my return. The county clerk's office was an old brick building that smelled of paper and wax. The clerk behind the counter looked young, barely older than my grandson. I slid the tax bill toward her and asked for a certified plat map of parcel 42B6. She typed, clicked, then swiveled the monitor. "There it is," she said. I leaned closer. The outline of the lake, my square of land, and a thick, black line marking the HOA boundary, stopping a full 500 yards short of my property. A rush of relief surged through me. "That's it. I need a certified copy." She printed it, stamped it with a heavy seal, and signed across the bottom. I paid the small fee with trembling hands, clutching the paper like it was a shield forged from steel. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. Dana's name lit the screen. "Dad," she said, voice tight, "this isn't a mistake. It's a target." "What do you mean?" I ran background on your HOA president, Karen Holt. "She's pulled this before. Filed altered property maps in 2 other counties, both times targeting homes with water access. 6 weeks ago, she filed an annexation map in your area. That's what she meant by a community vote. She forged it." My grip on the wheel tightened. I pictured her sugary smile, her patient sighs, her casual dismissal. Predator dressed as a bureaucrat. By the time I turned down the gravel road toward my cabin, the demolition truck was gone. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe the certified map had scared them off. But then I saw it half hidden by a tree. A man in a collared shirt with the HOA logo. A camera with a long telephoto lens pointed straight at my living room window. He was snapping photos, recording violations. My stomach nodded. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. When I stepped onto the porch, another sound filled the air, tires crunching gravel. 2 dark sedans rolled up, doors opening in perfect unison. Out stepped Dana, her FBI badge tucked discreetly in her jacket pocket, her stride purposeful. Behind her came my son's Ray, broad-shouldered and quiet from Homeland Security. And Mark, sharp-eyed, restless energy of a postal inspector. For the first time since that orange notice, I didn't feel alone. Dana hugged me briefly, whispering, "You did good, Dad." Then we went inside. The old oak kitchen table, where my kids once scribbled homework, transformed into a command center. The certified plat map went in the center. Dana pulled up the altered digital map on her laptop, the one filed by Holt. At first glance, they looked identical, but when Ray laid a ruler across them, the difference was obvious. The HOA line nudged north by 200 feet, swallowing my land whole. "She didn't just move a line," Ray muttered. "She stole your property on paper." Mark tossed down another sheet. "And this fake community vote. 3 signatures from neighbors who are either dead or moved away years ago. Fraud, clear as day." I stared at the papers, my chest heavy with anger. Mara, no. Karen Holt hadn't just targeted me. She'd weaponized the memory of my friends, used their names to steal. Then, as if on cue, the mail slot rattled. A crisp envelope slid to the floor. Inside another bill, this time double, over $23,000. They'd added a non-compliant paint code violation for the soft brown siding that Eliza had picked decades ago. It was so absurd, so brazen. I nearly laughed, but my children didn't. Their eyes were cold, determined. Dana's voice was steady as she placed the envelope beside the forged maps. "This isn't a mistake. Dad, it's organized crime dressed up as an HOA. And now," she glanced toward the window, where dust settled over the lake. "Now it's our fight." And for the first time, I believed we could win. The night after my children arrived, I hardly slept. The house that once felt like a safe haven now seemed surrounded by invisible eyes. Every creak of the wood, every faint echo from the lake, set my nerves on edge. But in the morning, I realized I wasn't the same man who had found that orange notice 2 days before. Fear was being slowly replaced by resolve. I had my family, and they weren't just here to visit, they were here to fight. By dawn, the kitchen table looked like something out of a police drama. Maps pinned against a corkboard, printouts scattered across the oak surface, my grandfather's deed resting like a holy text in the center. Dana had her laptop open, tabs of legal codes and county ordinances filling the screen. Ray moved silently from window to window, scanning the tree line as though expecting snipers. Mark, restless as ever, paced the floor with his phone pressed to his ear, following up on contacts and leads. When I poured coffee into the old ceramic mugs, I couldn't help but chuckle. Never thought I'd see the day my cabin turned into a federal operations hub. Ray gave a small grin but kept his eyes fixed on the tree line. You'd be surprised how often crime looks like this. Dad, quiet places, people abusing power because they think nobody will notice. That was when the rumble of another engine broke through. We froze. I peeked through the curtains and felt my jaw clench. A massive dumpster, the kind construction crews use to clear whole buildings, was being dropped right across my driveway. The truck roared, then pulled away, leaving behind the metal box like a blockade. Spray painted across its side in crude white letters, property of Lakeshore Grove HOA. Debris removal. Debris, I muttered, my blood boiling. They're calling my life debris. Mark was already snapping photos. He crouched low, capturing the serial numbers, the positioning, the timestamp on his phone glowing in the corner of each shot. Dana typed furiously, her voice calm and precise. This isn't just intimidation. This is obstruction. Emergency services couldn't reach you if they needed to. It's a criminal tactic dressed up as neighborhood enforcement. Ray folded his arms. They want you boxed in, Dad. Scared. Dependent. But we're not going to let them set the tone. I nodded, trying to mask the storm inside me. I wanted to march out and tear the sign off with my bare hands, but I knew better. Karen Holt wanted me angry and reckless. Instead, I followed Mark's lead, pulling out my phone and documenting everything. I opened the Notes app and typed it down, 5:32 a.m. Large dumpster dropped, blocking driveway. Photo evidence attached. Each word felt like a nail driven into their coffin. A few hours later, Mark made his move. He dialed the HOA number from the notice and put it on speaker. His voice was smooth, polite, almost deferential. Good morning. I'm calling on behalf of my father, Mr. Colton. We're a bit confused about this large dumpster in his driveway. Could we clear this up? The man on the other end let out a gruff laugh. Clear it up, pay the fine, and it'll be cleared. Simple as that. Mark tilted his head at me, mouthing, "Got him." Out loud, he said, "I understand. It's just my dad's an old man. We don't want trouble. We're thinking maybe he should sell and move." There was a pause. Then the man chuckled again, this time darker. "Now that's the smartest thing I've heard. We'll make it so he wants to sell. A lot cheaper for him in the long run." Mark ended the call, his grin sharp. Extortion. On tape. Dana didn't even look up from her laptop. Combined with forged documents. That's a federal case. But not yet. We'll follow the steps. Local law first. Keep building the chain. By mid-morning, Dana had drafted a cease and desist letter so precise it could cut glass. It cited state statutes, referenced the fraudulent annexation, and listed the recorded admission from the HOA treasurer. I watched her print it, the machine spitting out pages that felt heavier than steel. That afternoon, the county sheriff himself arrived, a broad-shouldered man I'd known for 20 years. He parked at the road, shook his head at the dumpster, and walked up with a grim look. I handed him the letter. He read it carefully, his brow tightening. Then, without a word, he walked toward the manicured entrance of Lakeshore Grove. Minutes later, out walked Karen Holt. Even from a distance, I could see her face, a mask of false politeness stretched thin over fury. The sheriff handed her the papers. She skimmed them, her expression hardening, and for the first time I saw a crack in her composure. Her sugary smile was gone, replaced by a look that could curdle milk. 20 minutes later, the same truck that had dropped the dumpster returned. With a screech of metal and a hiss of hydraulics, It hauled the blockade away. My driveway was clear again. It should have felt like victory, but that night, my phone buzzed. Tom, my neighbor Bill, whispered, "You need to see the HOA's Facebook page." I opened my laptop. At the top of the page, in bold letters, was a post titled "Community Notice of Violation, Non-Compliant Resident." Beneath it, a photo of my cabin, taken from that telephoto lens earlier. My name was tagged for the world to see. My throat went dry. They weren't just after my land anymore. They were after my reputation. But the plan backfired. The phone rang within an hour. Bill again. His voice heated. "They fined me $500 last month for a garden gnome. Said it didn't match the natural aesthetic." I thought I was alone. Then Cheryl called. They wrote me up because my welcome mat was half an inch too wide. I didn't say anything before, but seeing what they're doing to you. Her voice cracked with anger. "We've had enough." Dana leaned back in her chair, a cold smile tugging at her lips. They thought shame would isolate you. Instead, they just gave us allies. That night, our kitchen became more than a command center. It became a gathering place. Bill arrived with coffee. Cheryl with a box of files documenting her finds. A younger neighbor brought photos of violation letters so absurd they bordered on comedy, one for the color of his child's tricycle. We laid it all out on the table: forged maps, fraudulent votes, extortion calls, financial irregularities Dana had uncovered through public records. Each piece added weight to the mountain of evidence. I looked at my children, then at my neighbors, their tired faces etched with years of frustration. The cabin around me, once filled only with memories of Eliza, now felt alive with a new purpose. We weren't just fighting for my boathouse anymore. We were fighting for all of us. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel hunted. I felt ready. The following morning, I woke before the sun. My body felt heavy from exhaustion, but my mind buzzed like an electric current. The fight was no longer just mine. It had become a collective battle. My neighbors had shown up. My children were turning my cabin into a fortress of evidence, and now it felt as though the tide had shifted. Still, I knew Karen Holt wasn't going to back down. People like her didn't retreat, they escalated. I brewed coffee while Dana sat at the table, eyes fixed on her laptop. Her fingers danced across the keys as she pieced together the puzzle from county records, property filings, and the fraudulent community vote. Ray stood guard by the window as if expecting a raid, while Mark had a notebook open, scribbling down every date, every fine, every violation. "Dad," Dana finally said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "This isn't just about land. This is about money. I filed a FOIA request yesterday for their HOA's financial filings. If I'm right, the fines they collect aren't covering maintenance or landscaping. They're being funneled somewhere else." Mark leaned over her shoulder, scanning the spreadsheets she'd pulled. "See here, $500,000 over 5 years listed under general contracting. No receipts, no invoices, just lump sums. And guess who owns the company being paid?" Dana continued, turning the laptop to me. "Holt Contracting. Registered under David Holt, Karen's brother." My chest tightened. They weren't just harassing me. They were robbing the entire community. Before I could respond, a loud crash jolted us. I rushed to the door, heart pounding. At the end of the driveway, a pickup had pulled up and dumped several piles of cinder blocks and lumber right in front of my gate. A crude hand-painted sign leaned against it: "Non-compliant structure removal." Ray's voice was flat but furious. "They're not even hiding anymore. This is intimidation tactics." Mark was already taking pictures, muttering under his breath. "Every piece of debris is another nail in their coffin." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to march out there and hurl the sign into the woods. But Dana touched my arm. "Don't, Dad. Let them pile it higher. The more they do, the stronger our case." By noon, Bill and Cheryl had arrived, both carrying folders of their own. Bill spread out violation letters on the table, everything from fines for his mailbox being 2 inches too tall, to complaints about his dog barking once in a month. Cheryl had letters demanding hundreds of dollars for a cracked garden stepping stone. "This has been going on for years," Bill said, his face red. "We all thought we were alone, but she's been targeting every single one of us. Dana flipped through the documents quickly, her brow furrowed. Pattern of abuse, she murmured. Consistent, targeted, and financially motivated. Perfect for RICO charges if we build this right. RICO, Cheryl asked, confused. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Dana explained. It's usually for organized crime. But when an HOA president forges documents, extorts residents, and funnels community funds into her own family's business, that's racketeering. I watched the faces of my neighbors. Fear turned to shock, then to something else. Hope. The hours passed in a blur of strategy. Ray drafted security measures. He installed small, motion-activated cameras disguised inside birdhouses and garden lights around my property. He explained it with the precision of a man who had spent years setting surveillance in hostile territories overseas. If they step foot past the boundary line, we'll have it recorded from 3 angles. Meanwhile, Mark compiled every phone call, every bill, every notice into a digital archive, time-stamped and backed up to the cloud. He grinned when he labeled the folder Operation Karen. But the most chilling moment came at dusk. Ray's phone buzzed with a motion alert. He pulled up the feed, and we all leaned in. There, on the screen, was Karen herself. She had parked her car on the road and was creeping down my driveway with a clipboard, snapping photos of the stacked lumber near the dock. "She's trespassing," Ray muttered. Dana's eyes narrowed. "Good. Let her." We watched as Karen leaned closer to the garage window, peering in at the decoy blueprints Mark had laid out earlier. She raised her phone, taking pictures, completely unaware of the cameras recording her every move. Then the low crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. 2 black SUVs rolled up the driveway, quiet but deliberate. The look on Karen's face as she spun around was priceless shock dissolving into fury. The doors opened, and out stepped federal agents in dark suits, badges glinting. Dana followed them, calm and commanding. From my kitchen window, I watched as my daughter approached Karen. "Ma'am," Dana said, her voice steady, "you are trespassing on private property, but that's the least of your problems today." Before Karen could respond, the county sheriff's cruiser pulled in behind the SUVs. He climbed out, holding a stack of papers thick as a phone book. Search warrants. Karen's mouth dropped open as deputies marched past her, heading straight for her HOA office and home across the street. The illusion of power drained from her face like water from a cracked glass. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw it the beginning of the end. But Dana wasn't done. She pulled a leather folder from her jacket, flipped it open, and held it steady for Karen to see. Her voice was no longer that of my daughter, but the voice of the United States government. "Karen Holt, you are under investigation for conspiracy, wire fraud, and extortion. You have the right to remain silent." The rest of the words blurred in my ears as the metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the dock. The same dock Eliza and I had built 30 years ago. Karen's reign of terror was unraveling piece by piece, document by document, lie by lie. And in that moment, watching her power shatter under the weight of law and truth, I knew this battle wasn't just about saving my cabin. It was about proving that even in the smallest corners of America, bullies could be brought to justice. Karen Holt's arrest was only the beginning. I learned quickly that handcuffs don't end a battle. Sometimes they just start a louder one. That night, after the sheriff's cruiser pulled away with her in the back seat, the lake was quieter than I'd ever known it. Even the frogs seemed to hold their breath. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe it was over. But my children didn't share that optimism. Dana spread the search warrants across the table like a blackjack dealer laying down cards. "This was a tactical strike," she explained, her voice calm but firm. "It sends a message, but don't fool yourself. Karen has allies, people on the board, contractors on her payroll, maybe even someone at the clerk's office who looked the other way. This won't unravel in one night." Ray leaned back, arms crossed, eyes still scanning the windows. "Bullies like her don't crumble instantly. They lash out first. We need to be ready." Mark smirked, tapping his notebook. "Good news is we've got her on trespassing, extortion, and fraud. And better news, she's sloppy. Her paper trail looks like it was written by a drunk raccoon." I laughed, though the sound felt hollow in my chest. You kids talk like this is a war. Dana's eyes met mine. Because it is. Dad. And tonight was only the first battle. The next morning proved her right. At sunrise, the lake shimmered under a pale mist, beautiful as ever, but ugliness was waiting at my doorstep. A fresh notice had been nailed to the boathouse, this time in bold red letters, immediate property seizure pending. No signatures, no official seals, just a piece of paper dripping with arrogance. I ripped it down, my hands shaking. She's in jail. How the hell her lieutenants? Dana interrupted, snatching the notice and bagging it in plastic. She's not the only one pulling strings. Mark leaned over my shoulder, squinting at the sloppy formatting. Look at this. No letterhead spacing, no county reference, not even a case number. This is amateur hour, which means they're desperate. But desperate people are dangerous. By noon, the harassment escalated. An unmarked van parked across the road, its tinted windows facing my cabin. Ray identified it instantly. Surveillance. Probably one of Holt's people trying to intimidate us. Or worse, document fake violations to submit later. Instead of confronting them, we countered quietly. Ray adjusted the birdhouse camera to capture the van's plates, while Mark dialed a friend in the Postal Inspection Service to run background checks. Dana filed an emergency report to the sheriff's office, attaching timestamps and footage. The van left within the hour, another small victory. But it didn't stop the tide. By evening, my phone buzzed non-stop with neighbors calling. Bill said he received a letter claiming he owed $3,000 for excessive lawn growth. Cheryl reported that a man had knocked on her door, clipboard in hand, insisting her front porch light violated community lighting harmony. It was absurd, laughable even, but there was nothing funny in their voices. They were scared. That was when I realized Karen's arrest hadn't scared her allies. It had emboldened them. They thought cutting off the head of the snake would make the body scatter, but this snake had many heads. We decided it was time to shift strategy. Instead of only reacting, we'd go on the offensive. That night, my cabin filled again with neighbors Bill, Cheryl, the young father with the tricycle violation, and even two new faces, older folks who had stayed quiet until now. They brought their own files, violation letters, and receipts. One by one, they laid them on the table. What emerged was horrifying, a clear, deliberate pattern of harassment stretching back over a decade. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for things as trivial as mismatched shutters, chipped paint on mailboxes, or lawn chairs not aligned with community aesthetics. Each case bore Karen Holt's signature or that of her treasurer, Greg Parsons. Dana stacked the documents into neat piles. "This is racketeering," she said flatly. "Systematic extortion. They're not running a homeowners association. They're running a crime syndicate with clipboards." Ray added, "We can't just sit here waiting for them to strike again. We have to set the trap wider." The plan was bold but simple. Expose the rot to the entire community, not just our circle. Mark designed flyers with clear language, know your rights, HOA boundaries, fraudulent violations exposed. We included contact information, a short breakdown of how property records proved Holt's fraud, and a hotline number Mark set up with a secure voicemail box for residents to leave complaints. The next morning, we distributed them quietly, slipping them into mailboxes and pinning them to community boards at the gas station, the diner, and even the church. By afternoon, the calls started pouring in. Some were hesitant, whispers of fear. They fined me $200 because my wind chimes were too loud. Others were angry shouts. She made me repaint my whole house twice. Thousands of dollars wasted. Each story was logged, time-stamped, and added to the growing mountain of evidence. But the most shocking call came that evening. A man's voice, low and shaky, identified himself as a former board member. He claimed Karen had threatened to ruin his life if he exposed the financial irregularities. He confessed that he'd resigned quietly out of fear, but still kept copies of old ledgers that proved money had been siphoned from HOA accounts into Holt Contracting. Dana's eyes lit up like a hunter spotting prey. That's the smoking gun. We arranged to meet him at a diner 2 towns over. Ray insisted on scouting the parking lot first, checking every vehicle, every corner. his instincts honed from years of security work. Inside, the man slid a worn leather briefcase across the booth. "Everything's in here," he whispered. "Invoices, payment stubs, meeting minutes she buried. If you're really going after her, this will burn her to the ground." Back at the cabin, we laid the papers out under the warm kitchen light. Each line item was a nail in Karen's coffin, inflated maintenance costs, payments to her brother's company for repairs that never happened, and even checks written to cash with her initials scribbled in the memo line. Mark whistled low. "It's like she wanted to get caught." Dana shook her head. "No, she just never thought anyone would fight back." We spent hours scanning, photographing, and cross-referencing. The once chaotic pile of evidence became a case file thicker than any HOA handbook. I watched my children work, relentless and focused, and I felt something shift inside me. When this began, I was just a tired old man who wanted peace by the lake. Now, with my family and neighbors beside me, I felt like the tip of a spear aimed straight at injustice. That night, as I stepped onto the dock, the mist curling around my ankles, I thought of Eliza. She would have hated the fight, hated the conflict, but she would have loved the unity it had sparked. For the first time since she passed, I felt her presence not in sorrow, but in strength. I whispered to the still water, "We're going to win this, Eliza, for us, for everyone." And the lake, quiet and endless, seemed to whisper back, "Keep fighting." The following week unfolded like a storm brewing over still waters. Outwardly, Lakeshore Grove looked as pristine as always trimmed hedges, manicured lawns, the kind of place real estate brochures love to photograph. But beneath the surface, tension crackled like static before a lightning strike. Karen Holt might have been in custody, but her web of loyalists was still tugging at strings, determined to prove that fear was stronger than truth. I learned that lesson on Monday morning. A loud banging rattled my front door before the sun was fully up. When I opened it, 2 men stood on the porch in dark jackets with badges clipped to their belts. Code enforcement. One barked, "We're here about hazardous conditions." I squinted at their badges. Something was off. They weren't county issued. Their uniforms looked like they had been bought at a surplus store. "Hazardous conditions?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. "Non-compliant exterior paint and structural instability," the taller one said, flipping open a clipboard. His tone was sharp, commanding, meant to intimidate. "We've got authority to condemn if necessary." Before I could respond, Ray appeared at my side, his stance casual but his eyes sharp. "Funny," he said coolly, "because I happen to know the county inspector personally, and he doesn't send goons with knockoff badges before breakfast." The shorter man shifted uneasily, but the tall one pressed on. "We're just doing our job." Ray stepped closer, lowering his voice to a growl. "If you don't leave this property right now, you're going to be doing your job from a holding cell." The men exchanged a look, then muttered something about a mistake before retreating down the gravel path. Mark snapped photos of their faces, their car, their license plate. Dana was already on the phone with the sheriff's office. "They're escalating," she said once she hung up. "Sending fake inspectors, that's impersonation of a government official. A felony. They're desperate." Her words proved true later that day. The HOA's official Facebook page lit up with new posts, accusing me of endangering the community aesthetic. Pictures of my cabin, my dock, even my face, plastered online with captions like "chronic non-compliance" and "dangerous resident alert." It was digital character assassination, a 21st century version of tarring and feathering. But this time, it backfired harder than before. Dozens of neighbors commented beneath the post, defending me, mocking the absurdity of the charges. "If he's dangerous, then so am I." One woman wrote, "They fined me for planting tulips." Another man posted photos of his own violation letters, each more ridiculous than the last. The HOA's attempt at public shaming turned into a flood of residents airing their grievances in plain sight. That evening, my cabin became more crowded than ever. Bill brought his teenage son, who had been fined for hanging a basketball hoop. Cheryl arrived with her sister, clutching a file of violations dating back 10 years. By the time the coffee pot was empty, a dozen neighbors filled the room, their anger simmering into unity. Dana stood at the head of the table, her voice commanding. We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. Now it's time to formalize this. Tomorrow, we file a collective complaint with the state attorney general. We're not just defending Dad's property, we're demanding the dissolution of this corrupt HOA. The room buzzed with determination. I looked around at the tired faces of people who had spent years under Karen's thumb. They weren't just victims anymore. They were allies, ready to fight. But even as hope rose, the HOA struck again. On Wednesday afternoon, I returned from a supply run to town. As I turned onto the gravel road, a sickening sound reached me, buzzing, mechanical, unmistakable, a chainsaw. My stomach dropped. I floored the gas, skidding into the driveway, and what I saw turned my blood to ice. The boathouse Eliza and I had built with our own hands was reduced to a splintered pile of wood. Sawdust floated in the air like snow. The roof was gone, the walls torn down, beams tossed carelessly into the lake. Standing amid the wreckage was the foreman I'd seen before Ted, his reflective vest catching the afternoon sun. He barked orders to his crew, who loaded usable lumber into a pickup. I stumbled from the truck, shouting, "What the hell are you doing?" Ted didn't meet my eyes. He just wiped sweat from his brow, muttered something about orders, and waved his men along. Within minutes, the crew was gone, leaving behind nothing but rubble where 30 years of my life had stood. I dropped to my knees at the dock's edge, staring at the wreckage. My hand brushed against something smooth in the debris. A photograph, faded, weather-worn, Eliza and I, smiling in front of the boathouse the summer we finished it, her hair tangled with sawdust, my arm slung proudly around her shoulders. Seeing her face against the backdrop of ruin broke something inside me. I stayed there until dusk, silent tears mixing with the smell of raw-cut cedar. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt utterly defeated. They hadn't just destroyed a building, they had stolen a memory, ripped away a piece of my soul. When Dana and the boys found me, they didn't offer hollow comfort. They just stood with me in silence, their presence a shield against the crushing emptiness. Finally, Ray spoke, his voice like gravel grinding in steel. That's it. No more defense. No more waiting. They wanted a war. They've got one. His words snapped me upright. I looked at my children, at the fire burning in their eyes. The grief inside me slowly hardened into something sharper, resolve. That night, the kitchen table wasn't for evidence. It was for strategy. Ray laid out a tactical plan with military precision. Karen's people think they broke you. That's their weakness. Tomorrow, you'll make it look like you're rebuilding stack lumber on the dock. Leave blueprints in plain sight. They'll come snooping, and when they do, we'll have them on tape. Dana nodded. We've already got them for fraud and extortion. Trespassing will tie the knot. With the surveillance we've set up, the case will be airtight. Mark grinned, holding up a stack of decoy plans he'd sketched. Let's bait the trap. As I watched my children work, each one drawing from their unique skills, weaving law, surveillance, and strategy into a net, I realized something profound. The HOA had tried to isolate me, to make me feel powerless. Instead, they had forged a family stronger than any rulebook or bylaw. I glanced once more at the photo of Eliza, now tucked safely into my shirt pocket. We'll rebuild. Love, I whispered. But first, we'll make them pay. The war wasn't over. It had just entered its final act. The following morning, I rose before the sun, not out of habit, but because my nerves refused to let me rest. The air outside was heavy with dew, and the lake shimmered faintly under the first hints of dawn. But instead of peace, I felt only a gnawing anticipation. Today we were baiting the trap. Ray was already outside, stacking the fresh lumber we'd picked up from the hardware store. He placed it neatly along the dock, arranging it so that it looked like the start of a construction project. From a distance, it would seem like I was rebuilding the boathouse. In truth, it was just enough wood to look convincing, not enough to build anything real. Inside the garage, Mark spread out the decoy blueprints he had drawn up. They looked official enough, detailed sketches with fake notes scribbled in the margins, reinforced foundation, meets county code, improved load-bearing wall. He pinned them to the workbench directly in front of the window, knowing anyone snooping would be tempted to snap photos. Meanwhile, Dana oversaw Ray as he set up the surveillance network. Small, motion-activated cameras, no larger than golf balls, hidden in places only professionals would think to check. One inside a birdhouse with a perfect angle on the dock. Another beneath the eaves of the garage, capturing the blueprints. A third tucked into the thick hedge that bordered the property line. And a fourth, the widest angle, stationed inside the cabin looking out the back window, giving us a complete view of the yard. "They won't even know they're on camera," Ray muttered, dusting off his hands as he finished hiding the last one. "And when they step foot onto this property, we'll have them." By mid-morning, everything was ready. All that was left was waiting. And waiting was always the hardest part. The hours dragged. A squirrel set off the alert at noon, making everyone jump until Ray waved it off. At 2 o'clock, Bill came by with sandwiches, trying to lighten the mood. By 4, even Dana, who was normally unshakable, was tapping her fingers against the laptop. But at precisely 11:30 the next morning, Ray's phone pinged. Motion detected. He raised it to show us the feed, and my stomach clenched. There she was, Karen Holt herself. She had parked her car up on the main road and was walking down my driveway like she owned the place, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. Her steps were brisk, confident, like this was just another routine inspection in her little kingdom. She took the bait, Mark whispered, his grin sharp as a knife. We watched on the live feed as Karen walked straight onto the dock, circling the neatly stacked lumber. She knelt to inspect it, snapped several photos, then scribbled notes on her clipboard. She acted like she had every right in the world to be there. After a few minutes, she turned toward the garage, her eyes fixed on the window where Mark's decoy blueprints were waiting in plain sight. She leaned close, raising her phone, snapping picture after picture. "She's trespassing. This is it," Ray said, his voice low but tense. Before I could answer, the sound of tires on gravel rumbled through the air. Not one car, too. We all rushed to the window just as 2 black SUVs rolled silently down my driveway, their movements precise, coordinated. They stopped side by side, completely blocking Karen's exit. Her head snapped around, confusion flickering across her face before curdling into alarm. The SUV doors opened. Out stepped 3 federal agents in dark suits, their expressions unreadable, their movements practiced. From the second vehicle emerged Dana, her blue jacket plain and unassuming, but her posture radiating authority. Karen's expression twisted from shock to fury. She thrust her clipboard at Dana. "What is the meaning of this? You're trespassing on my inspection." Dana didn't even flinch. She walked forward calmly, her eyes locked on Karen. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "you are trespassing on private property, and that's the least of your problems." Karen sputtered, her face turning red. "You can't stop me. I am the president of the Lakeshore Grove HOA. I have the right." But before she could finish, the sound of another engine filled the air. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind the SUVs, and out stepped Sheriff Davis, holding a thick sheath of papers. He didn't waste words. He simply walked past Karen, handed Dana the stack, and turned toward the manicured entrance of Lakeshore Grove. "Search warrants," Dana explained calmly. "Signed and executed. Your house, your office, every file you've ever touched." Karen froze. For the first time, her mask cracked. The sugary confidence drained from her like air from a punctured balloon. Dana reached into her jacket and pulled out her credentials. She didn't flash them like in movies. She simply held them open, steady. Her voice was cold now. "Official. Karen Holt," she said. "You are under investigation for conspiracy, wire fraud, and extortion. You have the right to remain silent." The rest of the Miranda rights rolled off Dana's tongue, each word another brick sealing Karen's fate. Karen's fury collapsed into disbelief. "This is a mistake," she stammered. "I am the law here." But the metallic click of handcuffs cut her off. I stood at the kitchen window, watching as the bully who had tried to crush me with paper and intimidation was led away on the same dock Eliza and I had built together. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. But even as Karen was driven away, I knew this wasn't the end. She had allies, money trails, and years of corruption buried deep in those files. What we had done today was light the fuse. The explosion was still coming. That night, as neighbors gathered again in my cabin, there was a new energy in the air. Not fear, not despair, determination. We've cut off the head of the snake, Donna told them, but the body is still thrashing. This will get uglier before it's over. Be prepared. Bill clenched his fists. Cheryl nodded fiercely. Even the quiet young father with the tricycle violation spoke up. We're ready. No more hiding. I looked around the room, at my children, my neighbors. Ordinary people turned into reluctant soldiers. And I realized that Karen Holt had failed in the worst way imaginable. She hadn't broken us. She had united us. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The following days felt like the calm before a thunderstorm. Karen Holt had been led away in handcuffs, but her shadow still loomed large over Lakeshore Grove. Every new phone call, every fresh document unearthed by Dana or Mark, painted a darker picture of the web she had spun. We weren't just dealing with a power-hungry HOA president, we were dismantling a criminal empire that had thrived for years in plain sight. Dana coordinated with federal prosecutors, her phone glued to her ear as she pieced together the case. We've got her on mail fraud, wire fraud, extortion, and impersonation, she explained one evening, exhaustion tugging at her features. But the strongest piece, financial embezzlement. Her brother's company siphoned hundreds of thousands through fake invoices. That's what will bury her. Mark leaned back in his chair, twirling a pen. And let's not forget the recorded call from Greg Parsons. Extortion, plain as day. If he doesn't flip, he'll go down with her. Ray, ever the strategist, was less concerned about legal proceedings and more about safety. He doubled our surveillance, set up perimeter alarms, and even mapped out exit routes should things get ugly. Cornered animals bite, he reminded us. Holt's allies aren't going to sit quietly while she rots in a holding cell. Expect retaliation. He was right. It came faster than we thought. On the third night, just past midnight, the shrill wail of the motion alarm jolted us awake. Ray checked the feed instantly. 3 masked figures were prowling around the edge of my property, carrying cans of spray paint and what looked like bolt cutters. One of them began tagging the side of my cabin with large, sloppy red letters, "Sell or else." Ray moved like a soldier, barking orders. Stay inside, lights off. He slipped out the back door silently, vanishing into the darkness. Minutes later, the camera feed captured the intruders scattering like startled deer, chased by the unmistakable silhouette of Ray with his flashlight beam cutting through the trees. They dropped the bolt cutters and paint cans in their haste. Evidence. The sheriff's office collected the tools the next morning, fingerprints and all. Another nail in their coffin. But perhaps the most damning blow came not from intimidation, but from paper. Dana received a trove of HOA financial records through her FOIA request. Spread across our table, the spreadsheets revealed everything: inflated landscaping costs, phantom road repairs, and regular payments to Holt contracting for projects that never existed. It was theft disguised as community upkeep, and the numbers didn't lie. $500,000, Dana said quietly, tapping a column of figures. That's how much she stole from the people who trusted her. Money meant for snow removal, playgrounds, community centers, all funneled into her brother's pockets. Bill slammed his fist against the table. I knew it. She fined me $300 for having a plastic flamingo in my yard, and all that money went straight to her family. She's a crook. Cheryl wiped at her eyes, furious. All those years I thought it was my fault, that I wasn't in compliance. Turns out we were all just paying for her greed. By the end of the week, the case against Karen Holt and her board was ironclad. The prosecutors moved quickly, indicting her on multiple charges: conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, extortion, and racketeering. Greg Parsons, faced with overwhelming evidence and the threat of decades in prison, flipped almost immediately, confessing to the scheme in exchange for a lighter sentence. The trial was swift and brutal. Witness after witness testified: neighbors who had been bullied, fined, and shamed, experts who verified the forged maps and fraudulent annexations, Dana herself, delivering professional testimony that shredded Holt's defense into dust. One moment, though, will forever stay etched in my memory. The prosecutor introduced a key email recovered from Karen's computer. In it, she wrote to Greg, "The old man on the lake is being stubborn. Push harder. Raise the fines. Block his driveway if you have to. He'll crack. Everyone cracks eventually. Don't worry about the law. We are the law here." When the jury read those words aloud, a hush fell over the courtroom. I felt every eye turn toward me. For a second, I was back on my dock, clutching that first orange notice, feeling powerless. But now, that powerlessness had been replaced by vindication. She had underestimated me. She had underestimated all of us. The verdict came quickly guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman with little patience for bullies, handed down a sentence that silenced even the most hardened cynics. Karen Holt was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Greg Parsons received 5 after his cooperation. The HOA board was dissolved, its charter revoked, and a court-appointed receiver took over its finances. But the sweetest justice wasn't the prison sentence or the fines, it was the restitution order. The judge required Karen to pay damages directly to every homeowner she had extorted, and she ordered that my boathouse, the one she had destroyed, be rebuilt at her personal expense, using funds seized from her accounts. Weeks later, a lumber truck pulled into my driveway, not to demolish, but to restore. Neighbors gathered with tool belts and coffee, volunteering their time. Bill hammered nails with his son. Cheryl painted trim with steady hands. Even the young father with the tricycle violation brought his kids to help, their laughter echoing across the lake. Together, we rebuilt what had been stolen, not just wood and nail, but trust, community, and dignity. As I drove the final nail into the roof, standing on the very spot where Eliza and I had stood decades before, I looked out over the lake. Mist curled over the water, just as it had on that first terrible morning. But this time, it wasn't a shroud of dread. It was a blanket of peace. I touched the photograph of Eliza I kept in my pocket, whispering, "We did it. Love. We won." And for the first time in what felt like forever, the lake seemed to smile back. This story isn't just about a crooked HOA or one family's fight for justice. It's about resilience. It's about standing up when powerful people try to convince you that you're small, that you're powerless, that their rules are absolute. Karen Holt thought she could bend the truth, move property lines, and break spirits with nothing but paperwork and intimidation. But she forgot one thing: the law belongs to everyone, not just those who abuse it. If there's something I want you to take away, it's this: never underestimate the strength of unity. My children, my neighbors, and I prove that when people stand together, no bully, no fraud, no corrupt system can hold forever. So ask yourself, where in your life are you being pressured into silence? And what would happen if you spoke up, documented everything, and found allies willing to fight with you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stories. And if this fight inspired you, hit subscribe. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're a reminder that justice still matters, even in the smallest of neighborhoods.